Welcome everyone. Yeah, I did hear, whether or not I'm pro cat or pro dog. I mean, personally, dogs are better. That's just my opinion.
Wow,
But in
shots
space,
fired.
I'm not sure. Have you guys seen the video of cats in space? They don't like it. Their backs, their spines, they just look like jello.
Well, yeah, I guess they get used to it. I
Well,
was
hey,
trying to imagine. I was trying to imagine what one of those like climbing cat condos would look like in space. The zero G version.
uh, they would for sure find a way to make it work and cause terror upon all of our
hmm
lives.
hmm
So, excited for everyone to be here today. This is, a fun AMA for us. We're closing out testnet phase 3, and there was just so much that happened in the last, 3 weeks that, really has pushed us to, find all the weaknesses in kind of that current client, fix them, make them better, take your feedback, and just hopefully from there make, a game that all of you guys are going to absolutely love. And we are very, very quickly pushing, more and more. I don't know how soon you guys will see that in client, but there's a mountain of work that is being done in the background. I think first things first, I want to thank all of our creators, the people who entered the content creator competition. That was a ton of fun. We saw about 21 entries, 19 were, pretty well qualified. And then it was a pretty hard thing for us to have to figure out, who wins and who doesn't. That's never a fun process, but there were some really good ones. And then, of course, Gnarly Narwhal took first place. His videos were really fantastic. We're hoping to see more of that type of content. I think it's going to really help players get into the game more. And that's just going to be super helpful for everyone. So, moving into kind of where we're at now, and maybe before I push kind of where we're headed, Chris, is there anything you want to mention?
Yeah, I'd love to recap the test net. Just some interesting stats. I know that you've posted them here and there and sent an email out, but I think first of all, one really cool thing to me is that even though we're now a full week post the end of the rewards phase of the testnet, as I'm looking at Starknet's testnet right now, I still see in almost every block somebody's playing Influence. So that's pretty awesome. Um, and also, I think we're quite proud of the fact that this is now the third testnet in a row that we have set new records for Starknet usage. So every single one at the time was a new record for usage on testnet, and we continue to do that. So excited for the thousands of people who participated in Influence, but also excited that we're able to bring those same group of people to Starknet and start to introduce them to that ecosystem that will obviously be so important to Influence's continued success. We need swaps, we need marketplaces, we need bridges, we need all that infrastructure that is present on L1 needs to be present on L2 as well. And the more that we're able to introduce people to that ecosystem, the better. So thank you all. And stay tuned for phase 4.
Yeah, I think the highlight stat that I want to really call out is that about 30 million tons of materials were mined on Adalia Prime. So I don't know who it was, but someone has mined 600,000 tons of. So
A lot of
whoever's doing
extractors.
that, keep it up. You guys, you're crushing it. So yeah, I think that we could, definitely spend some time diving into those stats and talking about them. But for I think we'll save that for questions. If you guys have questions, we can highlight some more of that. But yeah, I mean, maybe before we dive into phase four too much, Proto, do you want to share maybe what you're working on now and how that's pushing us towards phase four?
Sure. Over the past, I guess, couple weeks, my focus has actually, I've been working a lot with Sergey, our designer. He's been going really sort of nose to the grindstone on the new UI designs, which I think one of you guys have seen the spoilered one from, I think, yesterday for the refinery. But we're really thinking really hard about basically what the different assets that you might want to view in the game are, things like asteroids, things like crew, but also buildings or core samples or basically ships, like things that you would want to find that you own or other people own, and thinking about what the UI would look like to allow you to find those things. Since obviously we're upgrading and replacing the outliner, that sort of right-hand bar that you currently see in the client. So you've seen at least one of the screenshots from Sergey, but it's looking incredible. We're just making sure that that UI will meet the needs of play for exploitation and putting the polish on kind of different buttons and different ways that things move around and so that it makes sense for players and also serves their needs as much as possible while still being sort of a manageable amount of stuff to work on for testnet phase 4 and for exploitation launch. I'm also putting together, just a few minutes ago actually sent to Chris a list of the actual filters that will be possibly in those lists of assets. So you'll be sort of how do you filter between different ships or filter between different crews or crewmates? How do you find those pieces of information and like what kinds of filters or searching terms might you want to be able to use? So we're going to be able to go. So we will be going over those soon and determining which ones we can technically support and which ones are sort of a priority for exploitation launch. And we'll have a flexible system where new filters could be added in future as we become able to support them. So it's not like if we don't include something at exploitation, it wouldn't be available later down the line. But that's I think I'm really excited to start seeing some of these asset searches and something isn't real until you can find it again. It's like I think a lot of you experienced this in testnet phase 3 where you like drilled a bunch of core samples and forgot to put buildings on them and you can never find them again because it's like where were they? There's nowhere to find them. So it's like they don't really exist until you can find them again, and then they do. So this is sort of an important step. Aside from that HUD work with Sergey, I also some of you yesterday were joined me for a couple hours yesterday afternoon / evening to take a look at the buildings. So the latest animated building models that we have for all 9 buildings for exploitation launch. I was doing a final pass on those just to sort of see any last minute tweaks or fixes or improvements that we could consider making to those, since we have one more round of improvements that scheduled for those. So they're looking amazing, as those of you who were there with me saw. They're really looking pretty fun, pretty cool. So just basically we're putting some polish on that and getting those close to being able to launch. Aside from that, I have been working still on some sort of improvements related to a change that I think we mentioned at the last AMA, which is that there are you're going to be able to, for the refinery building, get multiple outputs from certain chemical processes that might have multiple economically valuable outputs. So like if you're hydrolyzing water, for example, previously you would only be able to get either oxygen or hydrogen, and so now you will be able to get both as outputs. One of them being slightly less, getting slightly less of it than the other. You have to pick a primary, and the secondary ones you get less of. But I'm going through the production chains right now and trying to nail down exactly what changes we might need to make to support that, which, not very much. Like they've already sort of been designed such that that was implicit. You just have to pick. But now we're upgrading that so you don't have to pick as much anymore. It's more of a primary versus secondary decision, not a what you will get versus what you won't get. So upgrading that, upgrading production chains for that, and then pushing forward to try to get those actually polished up and ready for testnet phase 4, since they are directly needed for testnet phase 4 for the production chain buildings like the refinery, farm, factory, and shipyard. So that's coming down the pipe, and hopefully soon that means I will also get to share those upgraded production chains JSON files with those of you who are interested in that, so that the community production chains viewers can actually take a look at all the new data that will be in this latest release. Things like the recipe amounts, like how much of each material do you need to make something, how much do you get out of that process, and the densities of things and various other pieces of information like that you will be able to get. So coming down the pipe in the next little while as we work on testnet phase 4. I think that's more or less what I've been working on.
We're closing in on real, actual numbers.
Indeed. There are a lot of them. It's a giant list of numbers.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see that pushed into, production chain tools within the game. And I know Illyrium and Darius here in the audience are probably chomping at the bit to take any and all numbers and put them into their tools for the community. Super excited to
Actually,
see.
on that note, Proto, I don't know if you mentioned it, but we've sort of identified a couple of spots in the UI in the upgraded UI where we are going to start incorporating links out to community tools, especially around
Indeed.
production chains.
Indeed, yeah, we've been working on one of the sort of views. Like currently, you guys have seen system view where you're looking at the whole belt. You've seen asteroid view where you're looking at an asteroid and you see the lots and everything, and then you've seen lot view where you're looking at a particular building. And there are probably two more coming down the pipe for testnet phase 3. One of which is a ship view, so you can sort of see where ship is at and what's in its inventory and your crew and everything. The other of which is a product view. It's sort of a more abstract view because it's not looking at a particular product sitting in your warehouse, but it's looking at that type of product. And that's, you'll be able to spin the 3D model and get information about the production chains that product is involved in. And yeah, we'll be showing, sort of some more of that information relating to products. And it'll be, I think, a good way for you to explore the different products in the game and the different processes in the game. And as Chris said, we will be hopefully linking out to some of the community production chain explorers, product explorers that exist out there from that view, so that you can get more information. Like, we're not going to try to replicate what the community tools have already, what's already been built by the community. There's been some really incredible UIs and tools for sort of working with the production chains and figuring out what you might need, like a shopping list or different asteroid types that can produce different products just on their own. So those kinds of things we're not going to be trying to build into the client. Like, that's something that we think the community is already doing a great job at, and we're not going to try to compete with that. So we'll just link out to those tools, and I think that'll be a really great way to sort of tie in some of those community tools and give them some sort of easy access straight from the game.
Yes. So for anybody developing those tools listening, deep links, good.
Sorry, I'm also supporting people at the same time. So, yeah, okay. So I think some of you guys probably already saw the spoiler we posted yesterday. That was a in progress. I should emphasize in progress. Shot of what it might look like for putting things through production chains and where the UI is headed. We have a lot more to come on that. Sergey has been doing an absolutely amazing job. Honestly, I think he's a wizard. So that's really exciting. The game's going to look really clean here, in the near future. Chris, I don't know. Maybe are you thinking that phase 4 will be iterative and features will get pushed to the client whenever they're done, or are we going to package them up similar to what we did with phase 3?
We will push things iteratively. If you are following along, expect to see on the client, well, I guess in general, expect to see refineries, factories, and the farm/bioreactor functionality in place. And then also expect to see a lot around the HUD, music, sound effects, animations, etc. It's going to be quite a lot of work that is around sort of the API and the client and improving the overall experience. Because there is a little bit of a holding pattern right now on finalizing contracts for production StarkNet. So they're moving from alpha to beta or production or whatever you want to call it pretty soon. That process requires them to finalize the move from Cairo 0 to Cairo 1.0, which will also require us to do a little bit of migration on the contracts. And due to that, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to be finalizing contracts in Cairo 0 until Cairo 1 is ready next month. So for a few weeks here, we're going to be primarily focused on really buttoning everything up, getting everything ready so that can be the primary focus when it is ready. So as for the general questions about phase 4, yes, it is. It will be everything else. Certainly there will be some things prior to it that are added. Phase 4 will be our final test. Its intention will be to basically test everything from L1 bridging, L2 sway, flight. Everything that's remaining will be in that test. It will roll out, and then the only thing left really at that point will be polishing and responding to feedback to get ready for launch.
It's essentially a dry run for launch, with maybe a few things left out, but I think ultimately you'll have a game to play and it'll be fairly full featured.
Yes.
So I think with that though, I'd love to just open it up to questions. We had some updates, the creator competition. If you guys rolled in late and you haven't already seen the post, please check announcements or your email or Twitter. We have a link to an article that outlines kind of everything that we've been discussing here and a little bit more. And if you are one of the creators, it'll show you what you may have won. I'm going to do my best to reach out to all of you in a direct message, either today or Monday. So I think with that though, let's hear any thoughts around testnet phase 3, what you liked, what you're hoping for, and maybe we can answer you any questions, strategy related, whatever it might be. This is your guys' time to really learn more.
Do we want to share about the rewards amounts being available?
Oh, I think, yeah, if you guys haven't seen, you can check your rewards that you had earned in phase 3. Just note that those rewards that are linked in the article that I had mentioned, they are not able to be claimed until after launch of game. So you can see what you have earned, you can't claim what you have earned yet.
All right. Should we get into some questions?
Yeah. By all means, guys, you can raise your hand, we can bring you on stage, or you can just type questions.
I'm going to just kind of start from the top here.
Yeah, sure.
With, how long do we expect phase 4 to last? It's a good question. It's a little open-ended. We obviously want to make sure that we're launching with a polished game that doesn't have any glaring bugs and issues. But I would hope that it's in a similar sort of time frame as what we had for phase 3. Proto, you want to take Gutsy's question on engine exhaust velocities?
Yeah, I was actually pulling up the spreadsheet as you actually said.
Yeah,
so the question is basically
trying to do as well.
Sorry, was that? Oh yeah, we were both looking at the same thing. So basically, the exhaust velocity of a spaceship has a very strong impact on the actual ISP, like the amount of basically the amount of time that you could run that engine to hover that ship on Earth in one gravity. That's sort of what the ISP is, and that plays a strong role in exhaust velocity and also in the overall delta V that you can achieve by that ship. So if you look at our different ships, I'm pulling up the spreadsheet now. These are not final numbers, but this is what we've currently got penciled in. So for the shuttle, it looks like the unloaded delta V is at like 43 kilometers per second, and the loaded delta V is at 37 kilometers per second. The light transport has unloaded delta V of 45 kilometers per second and loaded delta V of 11 kilometers per second. And the heavy is pretty similar, unloaded delta V of 47 kilometers per second, but a loaded delta V of 12 kilometers per second. So significantly less since it's got those 12,000 tons of material in it. And those are all, I think, for the exhaust velocity of 18,300 meters per second, which is what the sort of baseline exhaust velocity for the closed cycle nuclear gas core reactor rocket is listed in the sort of design document that we were following. They potentially had a higher range that we might switch up to if we feel like those delta V's are a little low. So stay tuned for that. We'll have more final numbers for launch, or probably before that, as you guys start to get to play with the ships.
Another question on phase 4. We will almost certainly start phase 4 with a clean slate. A lot will change. There are pieces of feedback that we've received and also changes that we've put in place due to bugs that were identified, for example, during phase 2 and bridging, where we identified a need for basically a cancellation flow. There will be additional contracts on L1, the sway contract, for example. So we'd like to, like JP said, do truly a dry run. Now, all the state will still be around if you wanted to take a look at all the old state. But I think it's in the best interest for a bug-free launch that we do start fresh for phase 4. Will we have session wallets soon? Proto, what do you think?
I think I have it right now. So we've had, for testnet phase 3 launch, we had cartridge session wallets already enabled. So any of you who are using cartridge, you already have that functionality available. Basically, it means that you don't need to click approve on every single transaction you take in the game. It's just available. It just goes through immediately or almost immediately without any further actions. We just today or yesterday got Argent X session wallets working on our dev build. I think we're just polishing that up a little bit, and probably you can expect to see that on the Game Girly client very soon. It's great. It's really
Yeah,
good.
and I will add for anyone who wants to test out Argent X sessions, it's still kind of in their experimental features, so it is a little bit difficult to find it and then turn it on. But once it's on, it works great. So we'll probably have to put together a short little bullet point guide of how to actually do that. But it works the same as the sessions from cartridge. So excited to see that happen. And I don't know if we can confirm whether or not Argent X will have sessions outside of experimental until quarter 2, 3 is kind of what they're looking at. So we'll see when we can actually announce more fully that like it's just a natural feature and anyone can turn it on easily.
There's a question from Gray Area about the habitat utility and possible new utility. I don't think I mentioned, or there isn't any new utility that we haven't discussed before, but to just quickly summarize what the habitat's utility is the habitat is a base for crew, so you can store your crews, you can base them out of a habitat, they can live there. When they're stationed in a habitat, they will have reduced food consumption so that you can sort of save on food costs a little bit. The owner of a habitat can potentially set fees for somebody stationing a crew, so they can make some money by having other people station their crews in a habitat. The habitat will be a place where your new crew mates are minted. So when you create a new Adelian crewmate, you'll have to select a habitat somewhere in the belt. So if you want to have crewmates be minted on your asteroid, you have to create a habitat first. There'll also be the place where non-active crewmates that have not been added to a crew will have to be stationed. Those will chill in a habitat until they get added to a crew, and then they can fly around in ships and do other things as part of that crew. And I think probably, we haven't finalized this yet, but I think that you will be creating crews in habitat all the time. So you would be getting together some crewmates and making that crew. And because remember, a crew is kind of like a wrapper for a set of crewmates and all the assets they have, and basically a collection of all those parts, moving parts. And so I think that's where it'll probably happen in the habitat. But that's all essentially the mechanics that already exist have been described before.
Cool. Will lots be nameable? I believe yes.
Lots or buildings?
Buildings will be nameable.
Yeah.
Lots will potentially be taggable, favoritable. We're certainly working on like a bookmark system. So if you needed to bookmark an individual lot of yours, it may be that that's not a public name. Also means that you don't have to commit out on chain, but you could tag it for yourself. Buildings will be nameable for sure. Give people a good idea of like, hey, that's the marketplace I actually know, or there's the spaceport that I'm used to landing at, or whatever. And there will be a permissions system around quite a lot in the game, so that access can be controlled. We are planning initially to have a fairly straightforward whitelist method, as well as like a public-private switch for the buildings that are public by default. And the whitelist will be pretty straightforward. You get the whitelist other your friends or whoever else you want to have access to the building. That's one of the pieces that we've talked quite a bit about, basically enabling third-party contracts to be able to serve as sort of additional validators, so that we can include all sorts of interesting validations for who is allowed to do what where. The possibilities are sort of endless there. Anything you want to add on that, Proto?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Like, permission systems historically are one of the more complicated aspects of MMOs, and if we can outsource that to you guys, the community, we are happy to do that.
Yeah, they're typically the most complicated, and also at the same time, when you try to implement the complications, you don't satisfy everybody anyways, and ultimately, the want is always for flexibility. And so, I mean, the great thing here is that we can give just about infinite flexibility. So let's take advantage of being an on-chain game. Let's see. I think
The question for
answered a few of these. Okay, from Darius, for those of us who are not rocket scientists, what do those delta V's entail for travel times between asteroids? That is a good question.
Okay.
We might need to release a little calculator.
Yeah.
But in general,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, you go ahead, Proto.
Yeah, so the delta V is basically the velocity, the change that you can achieve with, propellant in that ship. So basically, if you have like a full load out of propellant and you fire your engine the entire time until the ship is empty of propellant, how fast are you going at the end of that? Like that's sort of the intuitive sense of what delta V is. And keep in mind that when you're traveling between 2 points, you need to accelerate and decelerate, otherwise you just sort of blast past the destination. You can't stop there. So you can only ever use like basically half of that delta V to get up to speed and then half of it to slow down again. So you can basically picture that, like, for example, a delta V of 40 kilometers per second could be interpreted as speeding up to 20 kilometers per second and then traveling at 20 kilometers per second for a while and then slowing down again to 0 kilometers per second when you arrive at your destination. So roughly speaking, I mean, this is, there's a lot more math involved, but roughly speaking, take half of the delta V and divide the distance that you're traveling by that, and that'll give you a very sort of rule of thumb amount of time that it would take to travel. And so looking at the belt, like as we've said in the past, I think the distances that we're looking at, we're aiming for time ranges in the hours, days, and up to a few weeks across the entire belt. Those are sort of the time ranges that I think we're aiming for. And if we find that the delta V's that we're looking at currently are too slow, we may sort of give some extra velocity to the exhaust velocity of our ships, even if the actual real physics are saying that would be a little bit lower than that. We may bump that up a little bit just to make sure that we can get where we're supposed to within those time frames.
In general, lots of questions on phase 4, the start of phase 4. Yes, everybody will start on AP. We're really intending to do this as faithful a simulation of launch as possible. So that includes like the claiming of sway for rewards, crew assignments, etc. All of that. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail there yet, but
Testnet sway.
Will include testnet sway, correct. It will also include like an ability to get that sway, probably with Girly Ether. So yeah, that's all going to be fairly faithful simulation. It's a need for us as well, as we kind of do need to test out our plan for jump-starting the economy on Adelia Prime, and kind of the way in which we reduce our involvement there as quickly as possible as well. So yeah, it's going to be as, again, like a faithful simulation. So if you're getting there at phase 4 and you're playing through it and you're thinking, okay, is this how it's going to go in game? Probably yes, unless there's a bunch of negative feedback about bug or issues or whatever, and we need to fix things. But we'll communicate that pretty clearly.
Yep, and just to be clear, testnet phase 4 and test to earn phase 4 are actually conceptually distinct things. Testnet phase 4 is, basically starting now as we're building out these new features and slowly pushing them to the Girly client that you guys can all test. But at the end of that, when we have all the features and we have everything lined up to be ready to go, that's when we will wipe the slate and actually do test to earn phase 4, which is the trial run, the dress rehearsal for actual exploitation launch. So you guys will be able to play with current state for a while yet with testnet phase 4 features, but as they slowly roll out, that wipe will come towards the end.
One question, and maybe Chris, you probably have a clear answer to this, but when we say there is most likely going to be a clean slate for phase 4, will they need to repurchase the asteroids that they potentially own, or is it just resetting the actions and everything?
It'll be everything. So I think we're still planning this piece and exactly how we're gonna execute on the start of phase 4 as well as the start of exploitation itself. But For the testnet, it's very likely that we will just take the data that exists on mainnet on L1 and use that at the very least to get started. And then, yeah, again, we all have sales of asteroids available on L2, and we will do our best to distribute the Gorilla Ether that you were all able to find and ultimately give to us as part of the previous testnets. We will again do our best to try and distribute as much of that as possible so that everybody can participate fairly easily.
Yeah, we might have to. I have not talked to Chris about this, but maybe there's a script we can run to send some Go ETH to all the addresses that have already participated or something like that, so that you're ready to go for phase 4 if we're wiping it clean. But I don't want to commit to that. It's just something that maybe is possible. Because I know us sending Gorilla ETH manually is time consuming, and
I thought you enjoyed that.
Oh, I mean, I love it. Delirium also loves it. He was a massive help to do that as well during this last phase. But no, I mean, I think we'll still do it manually. I'm just curious, if we're wiping asteroids clean and everything, then we might want a better Go ETH portal.
Yeah, for sure. That would be a wise move, I think. We'll do what we can there.
To
We
be
definitely
clear,
have the Go ETH for it. So
yes,
Yeah.
we do that. To be clear, people will still be able to use their same testnet StarkNet accounts, though, right? I mean, because they already
Yes.
have Go. Yeah, so
Yes.
anybody who already has Go,
You'll just ultimately be
set.
you'll ultimately be interacting with a different contract, different set of contracts. But that will be transparent to you.
The one thing I would like to mention also, guys, is I don't know how often these wallets will upgrade anymore, but it's probably good to check in on your wallets at minimum once a month. Just make sure if you need to upgrade them, you do.
Yes, the last update that will be required probably ever, although I won't promise that, so do check every so often, should be next month.
Okay, so yeah, back to some of these other questions. Any info on crew bonuses? I'm not sure if you want to share anything, Chris, but that is the question.
Yeah, so we'll certainly see all the bonuses. I'm not going to comment on exactly like the differentiation between the tiers yet, just because it's not finalized and it's not fully balanced. But that will all be apparent minus, last minute polish and tweaking changes that should be, much smaller than the changes that are going to be made from here until phase 4. Also, if you want to get a head start, you can typically just go look at the Influence SDK and the latest releases on that, and the latest beta releases. Those will have more and more closer and closer to real exploitation release numbers in them.
Wilmot has an interesting question here about delta V. Does the orbit time matter close to or far from the sun, and what's harder, getting closer or getting further away? From an orbital mechanics perspective, a star is a very large gravitational potential well. You can sort of think of it, like that sort of picture of the stretched rubber sheet with the weight in the middle of it. And basically, moving up or down that potential well, both of those require propellant. Those require thrust to get, delta V to get between those 2 points. If you're moving from a far point in the belt, like far away from that star, and you want to get to an orbit that's close into it, you need to dump a ton of potential energy. Basically, you need to have a big delta V change to get close to it, because you're basically getting rid of all that speed that you would have accumulated as you fell towards the star. You need to lose it, or else you just fly away from it again and on the way out again. And in reverse, you also need that delta V to get away from the star, sort of climb out of the gravity well. So they're two sides of the same coin. So if you're moving in or out, you will have an additional cost to your delta V beyond just sort of staying in the same orbital radius. I think that's...
We've got some incredible timing here. I would highly recommend going and getting Kerbal Space Program 2 next week when it comes out, and playing around with the orbits there, because it will help immensely in an understanding of orbital mechanics.
Although I will note that our game isn't trying to make you become a rocket scientist and figure all of this out, but you will have to be able to navigate kind of a pork chop chart or something along those lines to, properly gauge your flights. And, mostly it's just, when do you want to get there? How much fuel do you want to use? And, how fast you're needing to go. So, that's,
Yep.
it's going to be up to you. But I think in summary of what Proto just said is like, that's in the calculations for moving
Yes.
ships.
Yeah, with the client will calculate your route for you. What the hyperbolic trajectory, or typically a hyperbolic trajectory, needs to look like. And then you'll basically say yay or nay, go or not. And if it's not, then you'll probably move some sliders around, add more fuel, take some fuel away, push the time later so that the window is better on the pork chop chart, and pick that new time.
Okay, so can you distill any updates to StarkNet that get you and the team excited? So basically, what's happening on the StarkNet roadmap that we're excited about?
I think by far the biggest thing is the move to Cairo 1. What the primary impact of that, it's a change from a Python-based sequencer to a Rust-based sequencer, and they expect somewhere in the 10x speed range increase from that. So we're looking to get throughput immediately after Cairo 1.0 is launched next month of 20 plus transactions per second, which is already a 10x or so from where we are today. And where we are today is already like a 6 or so x from what it was at testnet phase 2. So pretty great to see that we'll be like 50 to 100x the speed that we were a few months ago, and on mainnet. Besides that, I think like the momentum is really starting. We're starting to see a lot more of the kind of like blue chip projects from L1 making their plans, writing code, starting to migrate. Open Zeppelin has been continually supportive. There's a lot of really heavy hitting teams that are ready to go and ready to roll out basically day one on StarkNet out of alpha, so that we have a really I think robust ecosystem right away. So yeah, I mean, like, there's honestly not that many kind of like new interesting things. It's just that they're almost about to deliver on all of these pieces that we have been excited about and thinking about for 6 months now. So that's the most exciting thing to me, removing all of those blockers that have previously been in our way. Also, I mean, I will say account abstraction is really cool. It's something that has been there from the beginning of StarkNet being live. But we're really now starting to take real advantage of it. And I think a lot of the blockchain space is going to be really excited and surprised at how awesome it can make an experience while still using blockchain. And I think a lot of the traditional gaming community is going to be maybe not excited, but hopefully just not even really know about it or need to know about the fact that they are playing a blockchain game. They're just going to be able to roll in, start playing very naturally, and start interacting, and only really need to care about blockchain when they start to want to take advantage of the benefits of it. So I think that's probably one of the most exciting parts of being on StarkNet and using Cairo.
So next question is, will some people have ships when we start phase 4 on AP, or how is that going to work with being able to get ships?
Ships will be accessible. we will ensure that ships are accessible on IP in testnet phase 4.
And then the next question would be, what does fuel consumption look like for a ship, something like a light transport? How much is it actually going to use? I know this is wildly varying depending on how fast and how far, but is it possible to give some insight in kind of how quickly you might go through your entire fuel reserve?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the amount of fuel that you use is directly proportional to the amount of delta V that you can achieve. So if you start out with a full shipload, like the light transport, I think has a 2,000 ton hydrogen propellant limit. If you burn that whole thing, like you get, if you're a loaded light transport for the current numbers that we have, which are just penciled in, it may change. You would get like around 12 kilometers per second of delta V from all that. If you want to burn less of that propellant, if you start out with a full tank but you burn less of it, then you'll get less delta V. If you start out with a not full tank and burn less of it, then you'll get more delta V since you're not hauling all that fuel that you aren't using or propellant that you're not using. But then you don't have it when you get to your location. So it's all trade-offs. It's all like how much do you want to use, how fast do you want to get there. What is possible and what isn't depends on orbital mechanics. So we'll obviously be checking that when we're validating your trips that you're planning. But it's all trade-offs, basically.
Let me go back to this account abstraction real quick to answer Olmop's question. Account abstraction is the idea different from L1, where accounts are sort of just inherent. They're called externally owned accounts. Your public key is your actual Ethereum address. On Darknet, with account abstraction, your account is an actual smart contract, which means that it can have a lot of different possible functionality, almost endless functionality. But one of the really cool things that it does for us is it means now your public key is stored on your account rather than it just being the address of that smart contract. And it allows us to do things like issue session keys, where you can basically, by deploying a plugin or by deploying a specific type of account contract for yourself, you can tell it, hey, I want to be able to put a new short-lived temporary key on my contract and tell it that it can run any of these 20 transactions if it's signed by this other short-lived key. And this is the one that we keep in the browser in local storage and use only for those influence transactions that you've approved. Outside of that, it kind of keeps safe all of your other more valuable transactions. We couldn't use that key. We never even see your private key at all. And we couldn't use the session key to do something like transfer your asteroid or transfer some ether or transfer your crewmates, because those are carved out of the set of like game actions that you are allowing. And that's really only possible right now via account abstraction. That's something that EIP 3000 something, 74 maybe, Proto?
Sounds right. Couldn't quote the actual number.
Something in that range. It's proposed to come to Ethereum L1. I think a lot of people see the benefit of it. It's one of, I think, the very best ways that we can smooth the on-ramp into blockchain, but it's not there yet. It is here on Starknet, and that's super exciting. It means we can have accounts that feel like accounts that don't feel like wallets anymore.
One of the things that helped me understand account abstraction the most was just the understanding, like, you have, in a normal account, you just have like, your amount of ether or your amount of different assets that are quote unquote in that address. With account abstraction, the signature algorithm and the verification of your signature algorithm are also in that address, in that contract. So you can change those out too. Like, that's the thing that helped me understand it. It's like, oh, you can change the logic around validating your signature arbitrarily, which lets you do a million different things.
I think account abstraction is going to absolutely, melt most of our brains in the next 18 months, because it essentially allows for anything and everything, to be created in logic and applied to your account. So, I think for gaming especially, we're going to see some very unique utility around account abstract or because of account abstraction. But I think the coolest thing here is that like all of the stuff that's created for gaming is likely going to just bleed into, any other application on top of, blockchain. Well, at least blockchain that has accounts with account abstraction. There's a lot of talk like underneath the surface right now with developers on what you can do with account abstraction. I think it even like semi enables what Vitalik was talking about recently with stealth addresses so that you can have more privacy. I'm super excited to see what this turns into, but that might be another discussion we have outside of an AMA.
Yeah, I mean, I think gaming is really probably like this perfect Trojan horse for a lot of this new technology. Like it just, it checks all the boxes for what you need to do for useful use cases, and it's going to bring so many people into this space. And, the last limiting factors were really the UX and, things like session wallets, or session keys. It just is so much better. That feels like a normal game. So I think we're so close.
I use that cliche all the time too, and then like later think about the fact that with the Trojan horse, we're getting in and then killing them all. It's probably not the best
Right.
one, but
Right.
but it is frequently used.
Trojan horse.
Yeah.
We're inceptioning the industry.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Although maybe we can't use that now because Leonardo DiCaprio in popular culture is getting canceled apparently.
I was unaware.
Okay, let's see here. There's a lot of talk, so I'm trying to weed through with the questions here, and it looks like
Netherx has a good question there.
Indeed.
One we talked about
yes.
for quite a while.
We went back and forth a ton about this. Will the photovoltaic panels produce more energy if the asteroid is closer to the star? And in the real world, absolutely. Like there's a square law. So if you get twice as close to the star, you produce 4 times as much power because of the way that surface areas work of spheres. But in the game, no. We decided that would be an unnecessary amount of complexity. Technically speaking, the inner asteroids are getting kind of nerfed because of that. Like you can imagine that they might just have so much extra power down there that's the place that you do all your refining is down in the inner belt, and then the outer belt is just so dark and cold, and you don't do really much of anything except for mining ices and things out that far. That's how it would actually work in reality. Is that the inner system is where you do a lot of the energy intensive work. But for our purposes, since we have, if we had made that decision at the beginning of the game, I think it could have been cool. But since we have not had that mechanic shared, and it would have a huge impact on the relative values of the different asteroids, depending on their semi-major axes. Since we haven't been consistent about that, we haven't, made any announcements about that or made a decision about that. We're not going to do that just for fairness, and it simplifies the game.
Yeah, and I also think we've talked a lot about kind of upgrade paths with Discovery around using the other energy sources basically as a way to upgrade the efficiency, increase output, etc. And so ultimately, I think it has become the sort of baseline energy that everybody will use, and ultimately everybody's going to upgrade it from there.
Exactly.
I don't see any more questions here in this particular channel, but let me make sure we don't have any other in the game questions. Nope, no. Looks like we're pretty much sold on questions here for now. I'll see. I think someone's typing, Nathrex typing, so he's probably going to follow up. But before we do close out and everything, and we can answer a few more questions, I do want to just say, we've had a lot of people help us thus far. The support from all of you guys has been incredible. And we also have, partners that have been really helping both bring more people in or try to educate others. I do see Keymaster from Soulbound here in the audience. I want to make you guys aware that the Soulbound quests for Phase 3 are still active. If you guys haven't already participated in those, there's a Soulbound channel here in our Discord. You can take a look there and just participate. I think they're going to be posting more quests as time goes on, which is going to be kind of just a fun way to learn more about the game. So Thanks Keymaster for showing up. Okay, Nathrax had a follow-up question. How long will it take to create hydrogen from water?
Yeah, Proto. How long?
Sorry, getting unmuted there. Like anything, how much water do you want to make? I mean, that's the question. But the rate of electrolysis is actually pretty low. Water electrolysis is actually one of the most energy-intensive electrochemical processes that you can want to do, just because of that really tight bond between the hydrogen and oxygen molecules. And so, if you want to just use straight up electricity to rip them apart into their constituent, different elements, you're going to be using a lot of energy. And I think I was trying to find the actual number there. The penciled in hours per standard recipe, which is something that you guys are going to get to look at when the production chains come out. It takes roughly you'll be able to do roughly 1,000 standard recipes per hour in a refinery. And a standard recipe constitutes, it looks like, around 9 units of water. So basically every hour you can do 9,000 units of water, and I think that's in kilograms. So yeah, so a refinery can do 9,000 tons per a dolly an hour, is the answer there. And so multiply that by 24 to get the actual amount, or 9,000 kilograms rather. So 9,000 times 24, 1,000. So you can get 216 tons of water electrolyzed into this, a proportionate amount of hydrogen and oxygen per real life hour. So that gives you a sort of an estimate of how long that will take. And if you want oxygen, this is not the best way to do it. It's just so energy intensive. So we have actually a different process for getting oxygen from carbon dioxide, which is like an arc decomposition process, and that's more energy efficient. So you can get oxygen faster that way. So that answers that question.
You've got an interesting question here from I don't know if you want to confirm or deny, but hydrogen, there is more hydrogen in 1 meter cubed of hydrogen than 1 meter cubed of water.
This is correct. Yeah, so Chabot is basically asking, moving water means you would be wasting your fuel moving the extra oxygen versus moving the hydrogen itself. So yeah, if you're trying to ship hydrogen propellant, don't ship water and then do the electrolysis elsewhere. Like do the electrolysis first and then ship the hydrogen, or better yet, just mine pure hydrogen from an I-type or an I combo type.
Although, if you're volume constrained, shipping, it might make sense.
That's true. Yeah, it's denser. The compressed hydrogen is still really not dense compared to, for example, water.
Yeah.
So, you could use that very tight chemical bond to sort of be a better approach to holding it together. But my intuition is that in terms of propellant efficiency, at that point, you're probably wasting more propellant than you'd be saving in the space that you were saving. Like moving propellant is actually one of the harder challenges in this game, just because of how bulky hydrogen is. Like it's this very, even if you compress it down or even if you cryocool it into a liquid, it's still really not dense. It's just a very light liquid. And moving it is just, you're going to be volume limited a lot of the time. I think probably we were discussing, haven't decided yet, but probably more than 50% likely to be allowing you guys to use propellant tanks as actually a storage mechanism for cargo, not just propellant, for particularly volatile, so liquids or gases. You might actually be able to store, for example, water or other liquids in those tanks up to a certain mass limit, and that would be a better way of, for example, transferring hydrogen. If you want to mine it, like you would put some of your propellant tanks to actual propellant, which is hydrogen plus some stuff, and then some of it to actually pure hydrogen if you were shipping it somewhere else to turn it into more propellant. That would be a possible way to do that. Potentially, we haven't finalized that yet.
I actually think that's going to be one of the more interesting to me evolving pieces of the gameplay is like where in the production chain does it make the most sense to stop refining or producing locally and actually ship goods off. I suppose it'll probably depend on the size of the asteroid, but certainly in a lot of cases you'll be saving some space by doing that.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about kind of what I'll call the fuel runners of the belt, and I almost imagine that you're going to have heavy transports stocked filled with fuel and set to like the slowest speed, but have as many as possible so that you have like a very consistent supply
Exactly.
versus something like metals where you can just crank up the speed and get to a marketplace and sell them. This is something that you need consistency in. So, they are the tanker ships of the belt. They don't go very fast, but they're always moving.
Exactly. I mean, if you're running a tanker ship, like it makes no sense to burn some of your product just to go faster if you can burn less of it and go slower and just have more ships in transit.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably going to be one of the most fun parts about this game, though, is that getting worked out. And I think in the beginning, people are going to make, grievous errors in when they're shipping or how much they're shipping. And there's probably going to be plenty of people who get to an asteroid and realize like, oh, I didn't calculate, my trip back, and now I don't have anything to sell, so I just have to like use the fuel to go back to where I need to go. And I mean, that's a learning experience in this game. It's not supposed to hurt. It's supposed to be, fun. This is part of a game, and you learn by doing. And over time, you get better and better. You become more efficient, and you can, reap more rewards at the marketplaces. The more, consistent and efficient you can be.
Yep. We're being nice to you guys by making sure that you have enough propellant to get to an asteroid. If you are starting a trip, we won't allow you to start a trip if you would not have enough fuel to slow down again when you got there. But we're not being nice to you in guaranteeing that you have enough propellant to get away from that asteroid that you get to. If you're there and you didn't bring the fuel or the propellant, you're stuck. So, think wisely about your travel plans and consider going slower than you might otherwise if you want to have some fuel to leave again.
I think this is also going to be a defining factor for marketplaces. If you want people to come and visit your marketplace, you better have fuel to supply to them. So that's
gas station convenience stores.
Yep, that's you're gonna choose, even if a marketplace has all the most amazing materials ever. I think you're still gonna be like, well, it doesn't have fuel, so I can't go there. I know Korvac's listening to this with his Patagon and thinking, yes, exactly. I shall rule the world.
All according to plan.
Yeah. Well, we're right at 3 p.m. Eastern right now, so I'm definitely gonna let the team take off here. If you guys have additional questions, just put them into the game questions channel in the Discord, and we'll get back to you guys as soon as we can. So thank you guys for coming. Really excited. If you're one of the content creators and you've won, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, I will reach out to you as soon as possible, and we'll get those rewards taken care of as soon as possible. If you won money, that's going to be through Ready Player DAO's bounty system. So I'm going to have to collect addresses from those people who have won some money, and then you guys will go into their Discord to claim it.
Cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, and we definitely plan to do more content creator competitions in the future. This was a learning experience for us in kind of how they work, what we liked about it. Do bounty programs work well? And we took a lot away from this, and I'm really excited to refine it and really get more and more creators into this space. I just want to say, like, look, if you guys are at all interested in creating content, just DM me. I'll add you guys to the content creator channel as soon as I get that up. And we're really going to try and lift up those creators from within the community. I think it would be absolutely amazing to have a really strong content creator presence that are from community members that currently exist. We're definitely going to be targeting some larger creators, and I'm doing a lot of work around that. But I really would love to see the alliances and other people in the game that are already here take on that challenge, because I think in the future we're really going to be trying to push some of that community treasury and stuff like that directly to those types of things. And I'm giving you guys, I guess, the as people would call it in this industry, the alpha. So here's your kick if you want to go towards that direction.
And yeah, if you want to start producing content, you want to build a following, please take advantage of the 21,000 people following us. We will be happy to retweet and promote your material.
Yep. And if you have a bunch of content that you are thinking might be good, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to go through anything with you. I can give you guys media assets. I am here to help you guys. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day. And yeah, let us know if you have any other questions in the game questions channel.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.